Hi friends, Coach Alexandra here again with over 20 years of experience of helping people navigate the application process, interviews, essays, and especially tests. So when it comes to the TOEFL is taken by a lot of people in the world, anybody who wants to go to any kind of graduate program that's taught in English usually. All right, so we already have another video that talks about TOEFL for people who want to take GMAT, who also need to take GMAT or GRE, and how you do the timing. You can find that. There's some good information there for you. Here we're just going to talk about a few points, not a lot, but just enough to get you thinking correctly so that you can make the right choices in your preparation plans and so that you can work with the right people to see whether they're really following an interesting method that's going to actually help you advance. I recommend for most of you to work with somebody who is good. Many of you, however, may be able to do this on your own quite easily, but I'm going to reserve that for people who have done a good job studying for GMAT and GRE. So if you haven't studied, especially for those tests, and even if you have, these points will apply to you. So let's take a look at the first part. So the useful advice for scoring well is first to demystify this point. People say, well look, just like on the last video we said, I scored very high in, I scored very well in the verbal section. Why do I still have to take the GMAT, the TOEFL? Well, we covered that. Here the idea is, and I've seen very many people like this. One of the things I love about my job is my partners and I, we get to work with very smart people, very motivated people, international people, people who've got great ideas, people who are who have great potential, and so we just want to help them think better. And most of these people that we work with, if they're planning to apply to a good school where English is the main language, well, I mean, of course, many of them already have great English skills, okay? So some people say, and well, look, I'm fluent in English, I speak very well, I use English all the time, so I think it's going to be okay, I think I'll do fine. But that is not the truth. Every piece of your application, including the TOEFL, wants, needs, strives, demands to be maximized. And it's not difficult to do. It's not difficult to do if you do it right. You must study for the TOEFL, no matter what, because you want to maximize your score, even if it's not a difficult test. Even if you're fluent in English, it doesn't mean that you're going to do well, and one of the reasons for that is point number 2. And point number 2 is, if you are not very familiar and agile with the test content and the test format, no matter how good you are at speaking English, you may be surprised by some of the timing or some of the sections. For example, and we can talk a little bit more about this, this video is not intended to be a complete TOEFL study. It's intended to give you some ideas and some hints so that you can really shape your own training. Okay? There's a section, for example, where you are asked some question on the screen, and you're given 15 seconds to create a response and to speak that response. And people say, well, this is impossible. How can in 15 seconds I do anything? Well, you can. Okay? And you can, and not only can you, but you should be able to do it very well by TOEFL standards and get the highest points that you can possibly reach. Again, for the good schools, you want to do it well. So even if you're, as long as you're required to take the TOEFL, no matter how well you speak English, if you don't want to take a class, get a book, practice, 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 practice. You also need to be listening, and there's often DVDs that go with it or online stuff. and make sure you know backwards and forwards exactly what's expected of you and exactly how you're going to manage each section. Which brings us to the next point. Practice all sections. Now, those of you who have done GMAT and GRE, for example, you will have a much easier time of reading texts and things like that, because you're going to say, well, of course it's a little bit easier than the GMAT. Practice those darn things anyways. You need to max it out. So you want to practice all sections. The trick comes on our fourth point, and the trick is, well, but how do I practice the speaking section or the writing section or even the listening section, because those are important. The speaking and the listening, they're not on the other test, but it does, but if you haven't taken the other test, it doesn't matter. Well, there's a similar approach that you could use for these. If you studied with somebody who is respectable, for the writing section on the GMAT or GRE, they will have explained to you the logic of how it works, because a logical argument always works the same way. And you will have certain things like certain introductions, certain conclusions, and certain transitions between the idea that are already pre-made. Okay, so that you know what to say as the first sentence. So you have some structural things into which you can put the specifics of the content that's being asked. So for writing, for example, what you want to do is, if you've taken the GMAT GRE, is to benefit from what you learned there, but you still want to practice. You still want to practice on the computer, using, of course, the same type of keyboard, if possible, that you're going to be using. Make sure, depending on the country you're in, sometimes the English letter keys are switched around. So that's a little thing, but that's for all tests. And for speaking, you want to do the same thing. In your mind, you want to prepare a bunch of introductions. So if somebody says, well, there's been an increasing amount of crime on campus, and what do you think we should do about it? Okay, I don't know if that's a real question, I just made it up. The point is, I have no idea what to do about crimes on campus. And they don't care whether you know what to do about crimes on campus. What they want to know is they want you to be able to put forward a relatively brief answer or something like that. So you would start off with a pre-prepared introduction. I don't want to give away too many specifics, but crimes on campus are really a serious blah, 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 blah. I think we should all feel secure when we go to school, and whatever it is, okay? Then you have some transitions, and then you have some conclusions, and you make sure you use those words. Or you make sure you use words like first, second, finally, in conclusion, because, things of that nature. I don't want to go into too many details, but the point is, this should not shock you by surprise. They're like, oh my gosh, they're asking me about the world population and I have 15 seconds to respond. The content of your response, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's a lot less relevant than the structure and the fluidity. Now, you can have an accent. Accents don't matter. You can have a heavy accent, a light accent, or no accent. But as long as you have the structure and you have some phrases that are pre-prepared, then you can incorporate them into your answer. But those are the things that you prepare ahead of time. So our suggestion for the TOEFL is study your butt off. And you should not find this very challenging, especially if you're moving up and looking for higher levels, but you cannot screw around. If you want to go to a top school, many of them want 100, 105. Some schools demand an average of 110. You could look up what that means. And you need to be as close or above their requirements to have a good chance. But it's doable. And you can have fun doing it. I'm Alexandra. You can find more information about me and my partners here on these websites. Please feel free to contact us with your questions. We'd love to hear from people who have great plans to improve their lives, to go to school, and to improve their careers.